Okay, good evening. This is Hayden Institute of Education, Diploma of Alcohol and Other Drugs, and tonight's module, it's CHCDFV006, Counsel Clients Affected by Domestic and Family Violence. It's the second session of three. So after this one, we've got another run of like 2 week modules. 1 week, 2 week, next one, 1 week, 2 week, next one. So I haven't looked which ones they are really. I'm not sure whether there's loads of role players or not. So,
Sorry,
can
I ask you a question? Sorry, well, unfortunately,
yeah.
according to my schedule, it's a 2 week. This is a 4 week module.
Okay, let me just check that. Oh, hold on. Yes, this was mentioned last week as well. I think Nepal mentioned it actually.
Because the assignments are huge. There's a lot of role play. It's big.
And here's Nepal. So we'll just start with the acknowledgement of country, which is in the spirit of reconciliation. Hayden Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live, and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual, and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging. So just as normal, I forgot what it was. It's the housekeeping. It hasn't changed. The only extra is this. I was a bit tentative about mentioning this last week, but this is more for you than it is for me. Yes, we'd all love 5-star reviews, but using the link here, which I'll throw in the chat, we want to develop the course. We want to develop all of the courses, the certificates, the diplomas. A lot of feedback a few months ago said that we want to be able to do the assessments in classes on an evening. We want to get role plays done in classes on an evening. That's why we're doing them now, because of the feedback. So we want you to fill it out and tell us how we can improve it, really. So, and then if you can't find where it says to give me a 5-star review, I'll point it out for you. Sorry. Anyway, get some feedback done. I'll give you this link. In a minute. Too difficult to copy and paste at the moment. All right, so working with different client groups is where we're going to start. So when we're looking at a client group, obviously we could have a cultural or a religious group. There might be two different religions in one culture. Just thinking of different places in Sydney where things are like that. And so in one community, you might have a few different cultures, a few different religions, a few different ages, a few different sexual identities, obviously. So with each group, then we've got to tailor the service to that specific group. So it might be the same service working with slightly different groups in one community, and the service has to be tailored for each diverse group. Like you don't advertise, you don't market a service for young people and old people exactly the same. The same service might want to tailor a service for them rather than sending both age groups off to different services. If one service can reach both in slightly different ways, that's a massive improvement. And then obviously disability, age, sexual identity, all blended in there as well. It means that we don't have to get perfect at marketing to different groups of people, but we just have to improve. We just have to get better because it's not easy. So legal and ethical considerations to start. We've got codes of conduct, obviously, privacy and confidentiality, work health and safety, and human rights. So they're obviously the same things that we're always talking about. The key boundaries that focus us to go to work in a certain direction and stop us falling off either side. We've got discrimination, mandatory reporting, contract requirements. That could be our contract. It could be a contract that we've signed with another agency. So that there's a few of us working together on one community or contract with that we're providing a service for a certain group of people. It could be a group contract for a government. So what are we bound to do in this service? It could be even our own job contract, like our own scope of practice, that this is what we do, this is legally what we do, and this is professionally what we can do, and this is all the stuff we can't do. So limitations. Health, AOD addiction, domestic abuse, and needing specialist help. So when we are limited in a certain area, then obviously we've got to refer on. We might be a generic specialist in one area, but then thinking that the client has had way more specialism than we are knowledgeable about. So we might have to refer it on to a different staff member in our own organisation, maybe, or a different service. Even to the point that, yeah, we might be working in AOD and it might be an AOD client, but then because of significant social problems or other social issues, we might need to refer them on. So we might not be up to speed in a housing case, or we might not be up to speed in disability or seniors aged care. So despite being an AOD support, we might need to refer them on because of other things. So obviously we've got domestic abuse as the key point. Excuse me. In the end, we might need to refer them for specialist help. Might need to get the specialist help too, because we might still stay working in that with that client. So we're going to get specialist support to help us. So we've got client information, collecting email forms, text messaging. If you're going to see the GP nowadays, most of it's done on your mobile phone. They'll get you to fill a form out beforehand, a few days prior, and all of that stuff can be done online without even having to get to the GP surgery and actually fill any paperwork out, which is really helpful. It's not difficult really for a business to set up neither. So we've got to get third-party authorization quite often. We've got to get authorization from a client. We've got to get quite often back story case studies from other different agencies that the client might have been working with. So we've got quite a big area to look at for trying to compile all the details. Obviously, once we've got the client information, we've got to be. I can still remember Ian mentioning about copyright issues and the differences between copyright and
IP.
Yeah. Oh, right. Well, there you go. So once we've got the client information, we're going to record it, obviously, but we don't record what we don't need. So there's a certain remit of things that we will need and certain things that we just won't need being an AOD service. We've got to maintain the records. We've got to update any client information. If the client moves house or the client separates from a partner or the client has children that are potentially affected. So we've got to maintain the records, and we've only got to make sure that we're keeping the personal information that we actually need. With sharing, obviously, we need the client's permission to share information onto any other agency that we're working with. And we've got to disclose who that agency is. We've got to disclose what we want, what the therapeutic methods are that we want to work with them on. So nothing's hidden. We're not wanting to hide anything from anyone. And we've got to protect their information, protect their identity, as well as protecting them as a person from maybe any domestic family violence issues, and like work health safety issues because they've come into our service. We're protecting their identity and their personal information as well. A quick, that wasn't meant to be there. There's a video that Vicky sent me today that is myths on family law, which is really helpful for this module. So I'm just going to put that in the chat. It's how long is it? I think it's only 5 minutes long. It doesn't say, but it's just a vague overview for what we're doing. There you go. We'll watch this just to bust some myths, and then we'll get back. Wow. Okay, I'll just jump back onto the slides before we get into the assessments. Oh, okay. So before I do the slides, I'll just give you the link for reviewing. Click on the link there to give us some feedback, basically. Give Hader the feedback. Trying to find where we've got to. Yeah. So, once we start with the clients, once we start with we've got some information, we've got their details. We want to develop the rapport. We want to develop we want to develop that connection with the client so that we can actually build something on it and start working with them so that they get something valuable out of it and we're able to give something of worth from our service, from everything that we've got. So we've got clarification, confirming all the time. Did you mean that? Is that what you said? Even if after every 10, 15 minutes, did you say that you're still living with your partner, or did you say that your mum had passed away recently? Just anything that you can check and clarify. Obviously, all we've got is to corroborate that, to confirm everything, is just the communication that we've got, the speaking. The body language and the clarification is going to happen behind the scenes. So we've got to be making sure that while they're speaking, we're still trying to communicate with them. And while we're speaking, they can still understand us, so that our speaking is not ruining the relationship that we're trying to create. And then we've got the additional research, the background information, looking at the client file. Some people like to have all the paperwork and all the resources and all the background check for a client before they walk in, so that they know everything about somebody. And then other people genuinely like to have nothing, just speak to the client on face value and say, so tell me about yourself. There isn't a better way. It can bring a sense of security if you think you know everything about them beforehand. Like if you've got all of the details from all of the other agencies that you've been working with, you've read up on all of the case notes that they've had over the past few years when they've been working in your service before you were there. So you know everything about them before they walk in the room. There is a sense of security in that, but there's also a level of, well, they've got nothing to tell me. It's like I know everything about them, but they're only going to tell me information that that I already know. So quite often it's better to go back and then check on old information, what they've said. So when they said they've been drinking every week, or when they said they've been smoking pot every day for the past 6 months, well, was it 6 months? And do the records say that they've actually been with the service for 2 or 3 years on and off? So it's maybe speak to the person first and then go back to the information, or if it's reassuring, then get all the information that you can. So as well as speaking, we've got all of the other modes of communication, because the words that we use, obviously, they're the small part of communication. The way we say the words and the body language and the interaction that we've got says a lot more than the words themselves. So we've got to be looking at body language. Like on role plays, when people are sat back listening to somebody else, and it looks really, really bad. And I know GPs do that sometimes. I've seen, just because you're a GP or a specialist doesn't mean you've got a brilliant therapeutic manner. But this is where we can excel. We can have a positive manner, positive body language, knowing how to communicate, active listening, and so feeding back to the person and checking what was said, empathizing and saying that must be really, really difficult if there's an opportunity there to create some connection. Obviously respecting them and trying to explain things that need explaining, not overly explaining things when we don't need to. That's obviously, for me, somebody's put that in. Because you guys don't really need to look at video and communication skills, I don't think really. It'll be there when you need it in the PowerPoints. So whenever we're talking to somebody, we do have to be thinking about what we are saying, and we do have to be thinking about what they're hearing from what we're saying. It takes practice, but we have to be thinking all the time of how is somebody receiving the words that I'm sending out. This message that I'm giving out, is somebody misunderstanding anything that I'm saying? And we can confirm that and check that by asking things like, okay, did you understand what I was saying about that? Were you clear about the way we're going to fill this form out? Did you not understand anything? Is there anything you'd need to ask? And then when they're responding, we're going to be checking that they've understood exactly what we've said. So just like we would be talking to them and paraphrasing and active listening and checking and summarizing, we would also turn that around and say, okay, can you just repeat back to me what I've just said? Or can you repeat back to me what you think I've just said? You can do that with goals and strategies and say, okay, so what we're going to do over the next few weeks, when you're wanting to reduce your cigarettes, the best thing to do is, if we've got 3 ideas, we're going to, first of all, start smoking later in the morning. Even if it's just half an hour, whatever time you get up that morning, if you reduce the smoking time by half an hour, and then do one thing that you need to do before your first cigarette. So whether that's breakfast, feed the kids, clean up after the dog, clean the front room, make the kids breakfast, or whatever it is that you usually have your cigarette before, do one thing before the cigarette so that it delays. You could then say, all right, so during smoke break at lunchtime, if you usually smoke 3 cigarettes, only take 2 with you on your break. If you have a half an hour break, then don't start smoking it straight away. Wait until you've had food or you've made a coffee or whatever you need to do. Don't smoke it straight away. And then, so you've reduced there. And then you can ask the person, so can you repeat back to me what the ideas I've just said? If they don't understand or they got confused, then we can clarify and we can we can confirm what we've said. With reframing, there's so many different perspectives that we could see about something. But if somebody's got a problem, if somebody's going through a certain issue, then there's more than one way to look at that issue. And I think the classic is the amount of people that when they hit rehab, maybe after many years of addiction, and maybe after a incarceration spell or living homeless, and when they start to say, rehab is the best thing that's ever happened to me, that's classical like reframing, that they've realized that they are not at the bottom of the barrel, their life is not, and they might think that when they arrive, that their life can't get any worse than where they are now. After a few weeks or a couple of months, and they start to say, actually, no, my life hasn't hit the bottom of the barrel. I've finally realized that this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Or getting caught by the cops, getting arrested, going to jail was actually the best thing that ever happened to them. It's difficult to try and explain that to somebody when somebody's having a difficult issue, and it's difficult to not just sound optimistic and say, well, you know, worse things can happen. And people don't want to hear that. People don't want to hear a horribly optimistic, fatally optimistic person. But when somebody can reframe something, or somebody gets to the point where they can reframe something and say, well, I know I've been with him for 20 years, but him leaving was the greatest thing that could happen to me. Now I can do this and this and this. And it's helpful when somebody can reframe it for themselves. But when we can help them reframe, or we can give them a space to reframe it for themselves, that's fantastic. Yes, Lisa.
Yeah, I have to pipe in that I have heard that so many times, like me included, and it takes time, and it takes the person to realize that, like, over and over, I've seen people come in here who are so unwell, like both physically, mentally, spiritually, and it takes time for them to come to that realization that, you know, rehab, whatever it is no way the worst thing. Like the worst thing that can happen to you is death, basically, because that's what we're dealing with here. But yeah, like we just see that over and over again. Like the transformation in people's lives is pretty extraordinary, like me included. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Questioning, open and closed. Even your role plays are the best place to practice all of this. I know like somebody's going to jump on it and say, oh, this wasn't acceptable. You didn't show the skills necessary or something like that. But the role plays are the best place to be practicing all of the skills that we're talking about, like practicing some open and closed questions, trying to get the other. And when you've got somebody that's, whether there's a script or not, they're responding to you. So you can literally practice the some closed questions and say, okay, so was it an easy journey to get here today? Have you had a good week? Have you been feeling good this morning? And just practice the closed questions, and then throw in here and there an open question that tries to make them think and give as much detail as they can. Because sometimes people won't shut up and you need them to, so you only ask closed questions. And then another time, people won't open up. So you have to think about, if I only ask closed questions, it's going to be one word answers for the next 45 minutes. And that's going to be really difficult. So questioning, there's an art to it. Body language, as I said, like leaning towards somebody, not right in their face. Being aware of personal space, but leaning towards them in communication. There's also, apparently, it sounds sexist, but it's apparently a fact. If somebody is talking to a female, the female generally doesn't mind face-to-face, eye-to-eye contact, but men completely the opposite. It doesn't matter who is talking to them. Men generally don't like eye-to-eye contact, face-to-face contact. So if you turn it to, I think they said 45 degrees is the 45 degrees, so that nobody's actually looking in the eyes and nobody's actually face-to-face. And a male client would prefer not eyes on, face contact, no, even across the room. They would still prefer off center, so that when a man is looking forward, all he can see is like emptiness, and he can just talk and think and focus. Because if he has to communicate to a person, it's going to slow down his thinking. Some women are like that as well, and some men like eye-to-eye contact. But generally, And then when that goes off to the side, young people, very similarly, might reduce their personal space. And seniors might increase their personal space, and that might be what they prefer. Indigenous culture and a lot of, not just Indigenous Australia, but a lot of ethnic cultures will prefer not to be looked in the eye, and they would like that off-center thing where, as if you were talking to a male, you not eye to eye, face to face, but you might be both sat at a table, side on, where you can both look at the same piece of paper, not at people, so that the focus isn't necessarily them. And that's probably why the psychoanalysis, like of Freud and somebody on a couch laid back, so that the person could just stare up, not at people. That's probably something to do with that. So summarizing, just getting used to, this isn't at the end of the session. This is at the end of maybe a part conversation that's lasted 2 or 3 minutes. And okay, so you're saying that you don't mind living with your mum, but really, if you had options of elsewhere to live, then you would look at them. And maybe you might think about going to rehab because of that. Is that what you're saying? So getting used to summarizing quite a lot through the session, so that it's not fully for them, it's for us, so that we understand what they're saying. And they know that we're understanding what they're saying as well. So introducing yourself, check the person is comfortable, show respect. These are quite good cues for role play. Monitor non-verbal body language. With that, you can often see how somebody's feeling. When I say feeling, I mean like nervous, or whether it's nervous, anxious, and stressed, or whether it's hot, sick, cold. Just by looking at somebody's body language, you can often tell what you need to know. When we're looking at a structured counselling plan, the whole thing is about the goal setting and the priorities. That's like, yes, it's SMART goals, but that's not the only way. There's other ways to talk around counselling, whether it's like motivational interviewing, whether it's like a CBT type of counselling talk. In the end, they've come to us because they've got a vague idea of a goal. Most people, if they come into a service, have got some vague idea of what they would like out of life right now, haven't got a clue of how to get there. So we have to be the kind of the strategist to try and help them get to the goal. So we're going to involve others, referrals, evaluation strategies, so regular assessments, mini assessments through, like we do the Victorian AOD assessment at the beginning, and then maybe a mini assessment through the middle, and then if the government is expecting 3 months of episode of treatment, then it might go to an assessment check-in every month, which could be difficult if they're not there more than once or twice a month, but we've got to deal with that. So again, with communication, we've got to clarify the understanding. Did I understand what you've said, and did you understand what I've said? If there's a bit of a curveball and they get confused or they don't understand what we're saying, this is modifying client expectations. This is on heaps of assessments that this is the way that government is designing the courses, that we can work with contingencies. AOD, community service, is all about contingency planning, that we've set a goal, we've set a strategy, we've set a plan. This is what's going to work like, this is how we're going to do it. And because we're working with people, it never goes to plan. Are we going to freak out because they haven't done the simplest thing that we expected them to do? Or are we just going to modify what we expected and say, okay, fair enough. Well, let's alter that a little bit. You haven't been able to get here for the past couple of weeks, and in that time you've done absolutely nothing. That's fine. We'll just alter it a little bit and make clearly it was too difficult for them. So we're going to scale it down a bit, give them something that is achievable, definitely achievable over the next couple of days, just to make them, just to help them feel like they are going to achieve something out of this. 5 minutes left before break. So client anxieties. There's going to be plenty of anxieties that are going to be potentially derailing them all around whether they have to, whether they're saying that they're going to rehab, or whether they're going to detox for 10 days, or they're going to come and see us for an hour at a time that is going to be putting them out, and they've just managed to get the kids to childcare or school, and then they've got to do shopping, and then they've got to go and look after mum. There's so many other things that are going on that we can't help them with them, but we can be flexible and not stress out that they've come half an hour late for an hour meeting and we're backed up for the rest of the day. What is it that we can do? How can we help? Because everybody's dealing with issues in life. And we've just got a few clients that they're taking all their issues home with them. We're not. Definitely, yeah. Sorry, McCoy, yeah. It could be past trauma that they're bringing in. So when you build any of these anxieties onto past trauma, which, as Gabor Mate is saying, that it's all about trauma, then we've got a complex set of issues. So rather than jumping into caseworking somebody straight away, and this is caseworking, but rather than getting straight down to caseworking somebody, just let them talk. What are the concerns? What are the anxieties about being here today? Just let them discuss, let them talk, show respect. If even to the point of, okay, yes, I realise that we've got to get this disclosure document done. I need to tell you about privacy and confidentiality, but you're really stressed, you're freaking out. Let's just sit down and talk first. And in your mind, thinking, I've got to get these forms done. I've got to get these forms done. And they'll get done, hopefully. Just making sure that if they can vent, then they can be calm, and then they can fill out forms a lot easier. So when we're looking at responsibility for actions, and there's indication of risk or a threat to safety, this could be obviously looking at it for in all sorts of ways. When we're looking at mandatory reporting, there's who is the responsible person in the relationship that we're talking to? Is the person that we're talking to male or female? Are they the key person that's going to be responsible for the child that might be at risk at home? Or are they going to be the person that is at risk when they leave here? So who is the person responsible for the safety, and who's the person responsible for the threat or the risk of harm? How do we assess risk? In the end, it's very similar to a WHS risk assessment when you do them in a workplace. If there's a significant risk or if there's a hazard, then we have to assess the risk up or low, and then we work through that and we evaluate what level of risk this person is going back to. And then if that's a threat to their safety, or if they are a threat to their own safety, then we have to evaluate all that. We measure it, and we'll make an assessment, a risk assessment of the person. So when client expectations are not what they thought, so they're expecting a certain kind of service, like even to the point of they come to us and they're expecting shelter, housing support for the evening, or they're coming to us for AOD support. Well, that must mean that I get a Woolies voucher as well, like, because everybody gives Woolies vouchers. If we're not meeting the expectations, like we can't pass details on to other members of family because they haven't fulfilled certain paperwork. There's quite often certain expectations aren't fulfilled. So how we manage that friction, that those issues, that can dictate the whole rest of the relationship, the whole rest of the episode for the next 3 months. So it's about collaboration. Yes, we're making a contract with them. It's going to be a legal contract, because if we break it, then we're going to get in trouble. So it is a contract, but we're working in collaboration, and we do have the responsibility to do that. I'm just going to leave it there. Yeah. Before break, if we so that's the reflection at the end. Then before that, there's the role play, and there's research project is the second one. It's a research project. You've done research projects before. Yes, Sarah.
Twain, I couldn't find a word count for that. I'm not sure if I just couldn't see it, but
I'm guessing that's because they're usually 750 to 1,000.
okay. Yeah, this
like-
is the first one I've done, so thank you.
Oh, sorry.
No, this is, yeah, I wasn't sure. So I was thinking,
Yeah. I'll pull that to the side and I'll see what, sometimes we get a word count as well that we're expecting when we're marking it. So I'll have a look at that one. But it's usually 750 to 1,000.
okay.
And the questions, the written questions, the quiz, there's only 6, so I didn't want to go over these anymore. Active listening, little case study questions there, self-reflection, consider the groups in your local community, choose 3 different types, little case study there, and then legal and ethical obligations. And so there's 4 assessments: the quiz, the research project, the reflection at the end, and the role plays, which is they're not complicated. It's just more than one role play. So a support plan template to start off. Mary's 25-year-old woman is referred to you as a caseworker and as a family domestic violence service by the local police following a recent incident where the police were called to her place of residence. Mary's ex-partner Tom, a 32-year-old man, had presented at Mary's residence demanding that she let him move back in. It was reported that when Mary refused to open the door, Tom smashed a window and entered the residence, verbally and physically assaulted Mary. The police removed Tom from the residence. However, Mary states that she's too fearful to return home and has been staying at her sister's house for the past week. So that's your case file. You've got a bit of paperwork to do as well based around that. And then exactly the same for that. And then Dale and Susan, a married couple, both in their late 70s. Dale and Susan care for their 17-year-old grandson, Michael. The couple have had custody of Michael since he was 10 years old. As their adult child, Sarah, Michael's mother, lost custody as a result of child protection involvement concerning long-term abuse and neglect. The couple have not had contact with Michael's mother, Sarah, for the past 3 years. Recently, Michael has become physically violent towards Dale and Susan. There was a recent incident where Michael had pushed Dale, causing him to hit his head on a chair. Dale has presented to your service feeling scared of Michael and unsure about how to manage the situation with his grandson. Susan has chosen to stay at home as she feels conflicted about seeking help about Michael. It's a pretty good scenario. So you've got 3 little scenarios there. I'm not going to say it's complex. It's just, there's a lot to it. So with each one, you've got that to go through. So looking at confidentiality, privacy, referrals, records management, safety, any applicable limitations to the above. So it's one of them things that quite often people will ask, do we have to mention privacy and confidentiality in every role play? No, you don't. You don't have to go out in full detail in every single role play. In these, you do. This is directly what it's wanted. That full, really good conversation about privacy and confidentiality because of the nature of what we're studying. And then looking at the collaborative approach, confirming the client's understanding of their level of risk. So the client needs to understand what risk is and how much of a risky situation are they putting themselves into when could easily be saying, oh, I'll be fine. He or she will, they're only like that when they've been to work and it's like, they won't be back till later, so I'll be fine. And they only go to the pub on a Friday, so I should be fine. Sometimes that can be denial and trying to avoid something that's actually there. So confirming the client's protective factors. So what's the protective support that they've got? Is it family, friends? Is it neighbours? Who and what are the protective factors? And then discussing possible referral options. I'm wondering whether, it doesn't mention it here, but I'll write it up here. The MARAM assessment it's like when we do for AOD services, when we do like an audit risk assessment, how risky is your alcohol use? We give them an audit assessment. Or how close to depression are you? We'd give them a K10 test. A MARAM assessment looks at domestic family violence situation and tries to assess risk in that area. So you could look at that. You might be able to bring it in. If you can't, if it's not, and if it's useless, don't use it. Yes, Lisa.
I've logged on to, I've actually done the role plays with Vicky already, but I'm having trouble doing the reflection because for some reason scenario 2 has disappeared on me out of my but if you're able to just show me I'll take a photo of it. If you're able to just show me the scenario of Angela.
Yeah.
Here we go.
So I reckon somebody's wanting to do a role play, a separate role play to get assessed. So that takes 2 people out. So the other 4 will split into 2 pairs and literally just look at a conversation with the person. If you wanted to do Angela, we could actually, look at Angela, since Lisa's going to be looking at that one anyway. So where would the conversation go? So I'll put you in breakout rooms in a sec. And where would the conversation go with Angela? What, like, thinking about needs, what is it you're going to focus on first? What would she want to focus on first? Is that appropriate? Who's going to be safe? Who's not going to be safe, obviously. So just the usual things. If you need to take a screenshot or a photo of that on your phone, then do that now. Let me just start recording so that we can feed back what was useful, what wasn't useful, what helped, where would you... I'll put this back on screen as well. There you go. So we're talking about Angela, the second one. So where would you go with Angela, and what worked and what didn't work, really?
My focus for Angela was I wanted to work out where she felt safe, and was she interested in home arrangements for herself and her children, or did she want to be with the family as a whole? Because I think the opportunity to get away from the relationship is important in this situation. Napor, who was Angela, said she wanted to stay with the family. So I said I work with that, but she was worried about Mark finding out. And that's, I mean, I'd already talked about confidentiality at the start, but that's when I said, if you remember from the beginning, I said that unless you state to me that you yourself are in harm, in actual harm right now, I can't say anything to anyone, and that what happens here is between me and you, and Mark won't know, which I think was reassuring.
That's cool. Yeah.
So that we just kind of got to that mainly.
Okay.
But I think in this is, when you're looking at collaboration with this, you really have to kind of work out what Angela wants in terms of her relationship. Does she want to move forward with it, or does she want out?
Yeah. Big decision. And she might not realize an answer to that first meeting, but maybe over a few days, even after the questions asked, she might start to formulate an answer in her own mind. How long does this have to be? 10 minutes, is it? It doesn't say, so it must be 10 minutes, yeah. So that's quite a lot to get into. No, it's not really, is it? It's just a standard one, really. So what's anybody else? Ian and Xavier, what did you manage to look at?
Personally, I was more worried about the kids
Okay. Yeah.
and making sure that they were okay.
Yeah.
Xavier?
He mentioned that he's eating, so he might be a little bit distracted.
Yeah, I was making sure that how do you
Hello. Sorry.
How do you make sure the kids are safe? If she's been beaten, then either are they traumatized, or are they being beaten as well? That was my opinion.
We were talking about possibly getting the kids in the next session, or after when she felt more comfortable to do so, get a viewpoint of your own.
I just go back to junior care, and they're the ones that we need to look after.
But I think you have to, I mean, you can't, they're 4 and 6. So you can't, obviously there's no point bringing a 4-year-old to a session. There's no point really bringing a 6-year-old to a session because they can't really speak for themselves. And they need, at that point, they need the parent in their life that's not violent. That's why I was asking, does she want to get away? Because the only other option then is to report it to child services, and they come in and take the kids away. So, and the reality is that the kids are probably better off with the mum, but until the mum's ready to leave the relationship, what can you do? Because there's so little.
Yeah, and we also said we had to go for a safe plan, and how do you get out of the relationship? That safety plan.
Mm.
In our case, Nepal didn't want to get out of the relationship. And I said, you know, that's another one. You're going to get a lot of women that say that they're not ready to leave.
Yeah, I don't say they have to leave, but you have to have a plan to leave.
Mm.
If you need to get safe, then you need to have that safety plan. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. And changing the term, making a safety plan is easier to digest than saying you're going to have to leave at some point.
Mm.
And look, then you go into, they live in a caravan, so everything's open, and you know, how do you get friends involved and all that kind of stuff.
What about Lisa and Babu? What did you come up with?
We did come up with the accommodation, the first thing, because they've been living in the caravan park for the last 3 months. And there is a family violence involved. There is a big bruise on Angelo's face, and Mark has been drinking frequently now. So family violence is a major thing involving now. And yeah, obviously kids, they both are same age, 6 and 4, as Sarah mentioned, so they're pretty young to come to the session. So, and one of them been missing from school, so that's where we have to start from. We need to find that child first.
Mm.
Yeah, both of us, when we were playing Angela, sort of came from the perspective that we wanted to get out straight away, and already recognised that that, you know, we wanted to get out and him to not even know where we were. So I guess because when we were playing it, the client was already there, then that changed things to, okay, what services can we offer you to go on to that? So, but that was driven by the client, not driven. It just sort of happened that we both did that. Can I just clarify something though? These are assessor-led, aren't they? Not uploaded role plays.
If they're assessor-led, if any of them are assessor-led, it's usually the first one, and I don't think it is.
Because I'm confused because I did these with Vicky. This has changed, like it was like months ago. Yeah, so I can't see it there now, but I don't know why, but yeah, I had to book in on a weekend and do it with Vicky.
How long ago was this?
Oh, maybe a month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I would hate to think that it is definitely assessor-led, and
yeah, I can't see where it says that, but it's weird that she would allow me to do that if it's not assessor-led.
She might have just thought that you had nobody to work with, and she just jumped straight into it.
Maybe, which I always do. That's never an issue for me here. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe it used to be assessor-led and they've edited it, and your name was down to get this done, and then it changed. And I'll have a look. There's a spreadsheet of all the assessor-led ones.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter now. I was just asking the question in case it was one of those ones that was unclear for everybody else.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't.
I'll have a look and make sure. What were you going to say, Nepal?
So it's just that we have to done with our classmates, or we can done it with our family or friends. How it will be like?
This is family, friends, anyone you want to do this with.
And
no
at the same
problems.
time, okay, so if we are doing with classmates, that's perfectly fine. And in case we're doing with our family or friends, then the opposite party has to be over the camera. How it will be like? The voice will be okay.
No, both people on camera.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will
Everybody
with Sarah next time.
We'll do it.
Yeah.
And just a random thing that some people don't think about. I marked an assessment today, and there was a girl talking to a client there, and she, like, the client was on full camera, and the client is reading a script, and she's not getting assessed, and the one getting assessed is like almost got the back to the camera. And some people just don't think that, but that's like they've got that the complete wrong way around, if you know what I mean. Anyway, all right, we'll leave it there. We'll have an early break. So it's almost 7:55. We'll come back at 8:05. I've got some more PowerPoint to do. Nepal, I'll show you this assessment. Yeah, probably the easiest thing to do.
Enjoy your trip. That's lovely. Yeah,
definitely. A couple of tools to look at. Not mention that I'm not meaning anybody in the group. I'm meaning some real tools. This is the MARAM assessment, multi-agency risk assessment and management, the framework to try and help somebody. It says it's an assessment tool, but it's not really. It's more of a I can't think of a word. It's like an audit. Audit is not an assessment. K10 is not an assessment. I'll get back to it when my brain kicks back in. So this is what Victoria is using. It is really helpful for anybody that's wanting to work with this framework. Just generally narrowing it down. You can go on training to understand it a lot easier, so that it becomes like second nature when you're working through it. The other tool is for something that New South Wales do, which is really, really good. This is mandatory reporting. And you can use it if you're in a different state territory, because it kind of helps you work through it. So it's a mandatory reporting probability tree. So you'd work through, if you think mandatory reporting is needed, and you go down and you say, okay, which area? Let's say it's physical abuse. So physical abuse, current injury. Are you aware or reasonably suspicious of a current injury? Yes, that's kind of why I'm looking at it. Tells you to answer yes if, and then if the injury is current, include injuries that are present. So, okay. Is there no? No. So I'll click that. Physical abuse, injury not accidental. Does child, young person, or another person say that the injury was caused by a parent, carer, or another household member, and or it was not an accident? Yes. Is the injury significant? No, it's hidden. Physical abuse. Are you aware of a pattern or multiple injuries? So you might have seen, it might be a child, like the 4-year-old and the 6-year-old for Angela aren't going to come to the office, but they might, because Angela might not be able to get any childcare, and in your service, you've probably got a corner of the room with a load of toys on it and jigsaws and things that somebody could play with. So you're seeing that one of the children has shown up a few times with injuries that aren't easily noticeable. Yes, there was a pattern. Are you aware of excessive discipline? No, it wasn't that. Is the child under the age of 5 with a disability? No. Is the child a young person refusing, afraid to go home? No. The answers you've just provided have been about your more serious concerns. Do you have other concerns about the safety, welfare? Yeah, kind of. And then you would try and describe something. You could literally get it to there. And just by probably not with the client or the family in the room, but just for your own emotional support or your own confidence to work through something like that. Putting something in here, family safety. Once you get to the end, in New South Wales, it will tell you who to call and whether a call is needed, which is, it's kind of helpful, but because of the direction that it takes, it is useful to use anywhere in any state or territory, even if you're not a mandatory reporter. If you work in community services, you would be, but even if you're not, if you were working in or a friend of yours was a mandatory reporter, so that's a mandatory reporting guide anyway for New South Wales, and this is the Victorian Marram Assessment. A few more slides to do. Yes, just as a bit of a calming end to the evening before we finish, just research some information that a checklist for counselling checklist that you could use for like interviews, induction, assessment. What would you be able to put on there? So just a little short list. I'll write it in the chat because it's easier rather than me waffling. Yeah, confidentiality. Yeah. All right. So when we're working with somebody that that we need to go through them things like all the assessment counseling contract, really. Like because a counselor is not just something that you can do as a method in a case working room. It's also a job title. Like I can't just practice to be a surgeon and say that I'm a surgeon with no qualifications. I can't. If I'm going to say I'm a GP, then I have to have the qualifications to back that up, and the professional association is linked. If I'm with so many other jobs, you would literally need the qualification and the professional association and the registration to say that I am that role. With a counsellor, you can literally say I'm a counsellor because you've done a bit of counselling. That's it. When somebody could study for 6 or 7 years and say that they still haven't learned all there is to know about counselling, and they would say, "Yeah, I'm a counsellor." That's almost a slightly different variation of a psychologist, and they've studied for just as long. When somebody can equally legally say, "Oh, I did a counselling course at the weekend on Saturday morning, so I'm going to be the work counsellor now." When you can legally do that, it's a little bit difficult, but it's just the way it is. So the best things with that is The Accidental Counsellor, the book. Sure, that was Gabor Mate. And books like that say, okay, you're going to be in a situation where you're going to need to counsel people. Here's the skills that you need. And that's partly why we're doing this module. So when we know that this is what you've got to do, the things that are outside that are the things that are beyond your scope. They're not part of your scope of practice. So looking at these would be looking at accessing welfare payments. Like you might know a lot about it, but with an AOD client that might be in the middle of some domestic family violence issues, doing this sort of thing is really, your bosses would probably say, you haven't got the time to do this with everyone. So don't get involved in doing that. Quite often the receptionist or somebody in like the front office that isn't going to be counselling somebody, they're not going to be caseworking them, they might be able to have more of an idea and they might understand and be able to talk to clients about this type of thing rather than us. Assisting clients with the AOD issues. If this is beyond your scope, you need to evaluate how, like I said earlier, if you've had plenty of training in one area and the client is so clued up in another area, then it might be beyond your scope. It might be beyond your area of expertise. You might know plenty of therapies, but as to the pharmacotherapy or the substance that they've been taking, you might be at a loss, so you might refer them on then. Legal or financial advice. If obviously that's when we do start to get into problem area. If we start to give legal advice and say, oh, this is what you really need to do, advising about family and criminal law, family law, once we start to do that, if we're not a lawyer, if we're not a legal representative, then we're going to be massive problems. Offering employment. Oh yeah, come and work for us a couple of days a week, or even a couple of mornings. Just come in. We can get you out of the house. It'll be good for you. These are things that we just shouldn't be doing. Almost like boundary crossing. We know what our boundaries are, and we need to keep this side of them. So goals, priorities, and discussions. That's where we need to be focusing our attention. The goals, trying to bring the goals out of them rather than saying, I think the best thing for you to do is set this goal. If we're saying that, then they're really not up to speed anyway, because imposing a goal on somebody is already setting it a little bit further ahead than where they are. If they haven't come up with it, then it's going to be too difficult to start off with. So priorities, trying to figure out what their priorities are with every case study, like what's the main needs, what's the main priorities for this person? And then the discussions, where's this going to go with this person? If we start to open up a can of worms about their family or their family that they're in now or their family of origin, where they came from, if I open this, where's this going to go? Then obviously informed consent, personal questioning, and checklists. Just getting the right blend of everything, really. And then moving on to the counselling checklists that you were looking at. With the interviewing, it could be a client that's in the office, it could be a client on the phone, it could be a Zoom session. It's still got to go over the same format, really. You've still got to be professional, whether we're on the phone, whether to Zoom, whether they're in the office. We're still representing the service that we're working for. So in the industry, the service in the industry that we're working for, AOD, the mental health area, then we've got to be aware of that at all times. Separate interviews might need to be done for whether they're on the phone or coming into the office. So there's a certain, because of the OH&S that's needed once they come into the office, like we can get by a lot more, we can get around a lot more with telephone or Zoom conversations. But once they're physically present in the office, then there's kind of a risk assessment and there's a different level of problem areas that we might need to look at. And then do we need an interpreter? Is the person English speaking, like natural English first language? Is that the client that we're working with? Or do we need to work through an interpreter to tell them what we're saying and tell us what they are saying? It's pretty difficult, but sometimes it has to be done. Like sometimes there's just no way around it, and it needs to be part of what we're working with. And that, for this week, is it. So I'll end that.